underway again. So lots of people came to visit, and there was some of the family used to stay there too.
Yes, for years we called Ab Clark. We called him Uncle Ab. We knew the family when we were living at Tenaiba.
Yes.
Ab used to live near us there, and he was a bachelor. He was an old man then. He could have been 50. I don't know. But
yes.
He came and he milked. He helped with the milking and.
So he paid his way.
Paid his way, yes. And he caught fish for us. He's a great fisherman.
Yeah.
And Ab was a great cricketer too. He taught us probably a little bit about cricket and a little bit about life. And then he moved to Sydney, and then Uncle Arthur, Dad's father's brother.
Dad's father's brother, so he'd be your great uncle.
Yes.
Yes.
He came there.
No, sorry, it'd be your uncle.
No, great uncle.
Great uncle. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He came and he lived with us for quite a number of years.
Yes.
Actually, he first came to the area. He used to drive the bread cart from Woodburn.
Okay.
And it was up. He drove from Woodburn. It had come up past York's area and around to our place and up to Flatley's and Williams and up to Robinson's and back
to Woodburn.
Back out New Whitley Road.
Yep.
And come back in onto the highway out at New Whitley.
Were there many people living at New Whitley at that time?
No, there was very few.
Gone.
Giacomo Piccoli was still there.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think he was the only one.
Yes. I visited out there when I was doing some survey work, probably 1968 or 69, and there were some of the mud huts out there at that stage.
Yes, the big
mud houses.
Yeah.
There
was a big double-storied one. It was in a mile of the current New Whitley Museum area.
Yes. Yeah.
There was one there, and it lasted for a long time.
Well, it's in the period that I was doing the survey work, we had some heavy rain, and it collapsed between that period. So
yes,
that was the last sign of it, because we were running survey lines past it.
Yeah. Uncle Arthur was on that Baker's Run until Barney came back from the army.
Yes.
Which would be late 45.
Yeah.
And then Barney took over and did the bread run for a while before he moved out to Derry in Wyandra area.
Okay.
Uncle Arthur was recently an article in the Northern Star, the recent Northern Star, about his ability as a drafts player.
Okay.
He was the North Coast champion drafts player. And a very good card player too, but you'd never trust him with the cards.
Is that right? Well, euchre was the game of choice, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes, euchre. And they used to play solo, which I didn't realise for a long time, but the priest from Korokai used to come down and play cards with Dad and Mum.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
I knew that, but I didn't know what card game they were playing.
You were talking about those visits, family visits and all those sorts of things. It inevitably ended up in a game of cards.
A game of cards, oh yes.
Yes, sitting around that big table you were talking about.
Table, yeah.
So,
yes.
No, I've never come to grips with euchre, but it was played with some vigour with the boards where they'd stick the matches in.
That was crib.
Crib. That was crib. Okay, which was different.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, crib was a good game too.
Yeah.
You had to watch Uncle Arthur because he had little signs that we all do, I suppose.
Yeah,
we all give signs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, when you finished school, what did you do? What was your first job?
Well, the first individual job was tabling millet at Robinson's farm at Bungarawalbin. Now, in tabling millet, it's a broom millet, it's a broom that you make your straw brooms out of. Yeah. And it's about 8 foot tall, and you back down between two rows, bending it at about hip height, one over the other, and you go down and you form a table down the middle
Yes.
with the heads over like that. Then the cutters come along and they cut that head off and put it on that table to dry. And then from there, somebody comes along and gets it and they bundle it up and take it in and de-seed it
Yes.
and make the brooms out of it. And that, it was quite a big, big sideline
Yes.
to the Northern Rivers at that stage.
Yes.
And they sent brooms all over New South Wales, probably all over Australia.
Yes.
My first main job was I was walking along the street in Milesville Street in Lismore one day. We hadn't got the results from the leaving certificate. They came out probably mid-January or something. It was early January, and I was thinking, well, you know, what am I going to do? What do I want to do? And I saw this sign, the Union Bank. So I ducked in, I went in and asked to see the manager, Harry Dale was his name. I said, I told him who I was, what I'd done, and I said, I'm looking for a job. He said, when can your father come in? So the following week, Dad and I went to see the bank manager, and I started a fortnight later.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the Union Bank.
At the Union Bank.
This was 1948, and you would have been 18 years old.
Yeah, 17.
17 years
17
old.
years old.
Yes.
The 11th of February, 1948. And I can still remember, it was Harry Dale, and Gilbert Chesney Dickinson, Innes Allen Morrison, Heather Gray from Alstonville. Anyway, there was quite a few people.
Yes. Yeah.
And I enjoyed it, but in that job, I was talking to my grandson yesterday. He's got his phone, all these directions, you know,
Yes.
when's it going to rain, or I asked him about something and he said, just a minute, and got all that information. I started off filling inkwells and making sure there was plenty of paper around for everybody,
Yes.
and going to get the biscuits and
So how much did you get paid? Do you remember?
$284 a year, I think.
Pounds a year.
Pounds a year.
Yeah.
$284.
So you were sort of just an office roustabout initially.
Called it, junior.
Junior. Yeah.
And Heather Gray was the head ledger keeper.
Yeah.
And Stan Cullen. And Stan was a big 6'3" bloke. And they got married later on, which was lovely because they're two beaut people.
Yeah.
And I had to learn to do the ledger work. You got all the deposits for somebody's account and
Yeah.
all the checks that come in from the bank, from other banks, and you wrote them up in the book.
So
In the book.
it was all handwritten.
All handwritten, and some of the previous people that have been using that book was beautiful copperplate
Oh,
writing.
yes.
And
Yes.
my writing was quite good at that stage, you know.
Yes.
It's not now, but the ledgers were probably be 30 centimetres wide,
Yeah.
at least 40 centimetres long,
Yeah.
and about 10 centimetres high.
Yeah.
And these great big books.
They were loose leaf, were they? So
No, these were
fixed, were they?
fixed leaf. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm.
So did you have a ledger for 10 people or one person, or how did all that work?
There was A to G, H to O, and P
Oh, okay.
to Z.
Yes.
There were three. I can remember them. A to G, H to O,
Yeah.
and P to Z was the.
So if someone wrote a check,
Yeah.
you'd have to.
You find their page, write the amount into the check,
Yeah.
if it was in favour of the amount, and then adjust the balance.
Adjust the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was painstaking, but it was good. You know, we had people like Morangan and Cannell, the big bottle department, introduced them at that stage, and they were, Joe Morangan, pardon me, was more or less the patriarch of all the Italians in the area.
Okay.
What Joe said went, you know.
So did they made bottles, did they?
No, they sold beer,
Sold
wine bottles, bottle shop.
Bottle shop.
Bottle shop.
Okay.
I remember one time, one of the other banks stole one of our customers, an Italian, and he came to get his balance transferred down, and Harry Dale went to see Joe Morangan and said to Joe, he said, if that account's not back in my books by this afternoon, I will take 20 of theirs next week. Joe went sort of open. You can't put it back there.
Is that right?
Same day. Didn't last a day.
Is that right?
Yeah. So Joe had plenty of authority, but he was a wonderful, wonderful person. You know, real good people.
Okay.
So
so there were cash. Everything was cash, of course, out the front, and all those sorts of
yes,
things.
yeah. And the teller's job was a very important job. Very, had to be very well trusted.
Yeah. Well, people had books that they would keep their balances into, so you had to.
And you had to give them a statement once a. Well, some of them wanted once a week, some of them once a month, once every year, you know.
Yes.
A statement of their transactions.
And they were all handwritten.
They were all handwritten.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing, isn't it, compared to today?
Today, you know, you push a button and you foot, and you've got 10 pages.
Well, you don't even push a button, you push and it turns up on your screen. Yeah, so the Union Bank you joined?
Union Bank, yes.
Okay, you were there for a short period of time and then you headed off somewhere?
Yes, I don't know why, but they needed somebody at Narandra to relieve the ledger keeper down there. And so they flew me from Evans Head in Butler's Air Transport to Sydney and then out to Narandra for 3 weeks.
Now so that was interesting that you flew from Evans Head and there was a regular service from there.
Yes. It was the local airport, because having been the Air Force base during the war, they had good runways and everything like that. And it was equidistant from Casino Lismore and Balma, so it was
the airport.
It was the airport, yeah.
That's an amazing thing, isn't it?
And I flew out to Narandra and I did my 3 weeks there, and then I went to Barellan for 3 weeks. And Barellan was only half an hour or so away from Narandra.
Yes.
And I did 3 weeks relief there. Then I went to Temora, and I was there for about 3 months, I think, as probably a ledger keeper and general rouseabout as well.
Yes.
And Mr. Scudder was the manager there. Mr. Scudder, a very little man, a real Scrooge-looking man, but a good man.
Yes. Suitable for the job.
Yes. And the teller was Mr. Hughes. Now, Mr. Hughes, it should have been spelled H-U-G-E, because he was huge.
He was a big man.
He was a very big man with and he had a little black apron about that square, about a foot square, where his tummy used to rub up against the counter. But anyway, lots of good things happened at Narandra, at Temora, and actually that's where I had my second, as you've told me since, my second appearance on stage, singing. You reminded me of the one of Where Have You Been, Billy Boy?
Yes.
Yes. And locals put on a show, and I was with a group of young people, and one of the group was the pianist for this show. He had heard me sing somewhere, so he dobbed me in, and I had the first solo of the show, one and only solo. But that was good. You know, Peter Fitch, this bloke's name was, and I met him later on when I was working in Sydney.
Yes.
He became a wonderful friend.
Yeah.
But from there they sent me to Berrigan, to the big branch at Berrigan with two people, the boss and me.
Is that right?
And I was teller, junior, equal filler, got the mail, made the morning tea, and the boss did the boss's work plus the ledgers. He did the ledger work as well.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So did you have any guns or anything, any security around in your banks at all?
oh yes, we always had the gun it came out every morning
Yes.
and was sitting just beside you. And,
Yes.
later on, when I was at Padstow, I was living in Beverly Hills and used to catch the train to Padstow each day, and I got down to the train to the station, and Alan Stewart, the manager, was there. And he used to get on, he lived at Canterbury, he used to get on at St Peter's or somewhere, way early, but he's waiting at the station for me. And he said, we'll miss the next train, and I'll talk to you. So the police had been doing a search of some crook's place while they were away, and found out plans of the bank at Padstow, times and everything, was where they were going to come and knock that bank off.
Is that right?
Yeah, and Alan, we told me all about it. He said, we've got to go to work and be as natural as we can. When we got there, there was a knock at the back door, of course, and the detectives came in, and
Yes.
they took all any guns away from us.
Yes.
And it was 10:30. This bank, they were going to come to the bank, and because Alan had to let them know in head office, and he said, we don't want anybody coming and upsetting the whole thing. Because about an hour later, bloody head office cars there with the manager for New South Wales and two of his cronies driving round. The thing they shouldn't have done at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got a message, a phone call to say that they'd left home. They'd left their home over at Bankstown. There was a bloke who was called Taylor, but he wasn't Squizzy Taylor, but he was of that same ilk.
Yeah.
They were heading, they drove past the bank and round and went off.
Yes.
They must have sussed something.
Yeah.
There was a bloke, Colin Teague, the local barber, came in about 10:10.
Yeah.
And he wanted to talk to the boss, and I said, the boss is busy at the moment. He said, I wonder if he's actually opened the door, and here's these two detectives there with shotguns. And of course, Colin didn't know what to do, but anyway, he left fairly quickly.
Yes. Yes.
But it's amazing, they were just going to shoot him.
Yes.
If he came in,
Yes.
they would say, put him up, bang.
Yes.
That was going to be it. They weren't
Yeah.
going to muck around with him.
No, it was a different era, wasn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
he was a baddie, and you shoot baddies.
Yeah, that's right. So
But anyway, getting back to where we were,
you were at.
I just moved to Berrigan.
Yes.
Yeah, and at that stage, the Berrigan was a Union Bank and a Bank of Australasia, and they merged. Head offices merged to form the ANZ Bank,
Yes.
and we were the first branch in New South Wales to transfer all our business into the other building and just become one, instead of having two branches of the same name, just the one. And we were the experimental one, mainly because there was only two of us in the office, and the business wasn't that big.
Yeah.
But that we went there, and I was stayed there for another 3 years at Berrigan.
And it was then the ANZ.
That then became the ANZ.
Yes.
And then later on, of course, after I left the bank, I joined with the ES&A Bank, English, Scottish and Australian Bank, to become the ANZ Banking Corporation.
Okay.
And ever since gobbled up other little ones and
Yeah.
made fools of themselves with their activities along the road.
It is true. Okay, so you were out there for a while?
Yes, yeah.
Before you headed back to Sydney? Yeah.
It's amazing that in little country towns like that, and not only that size, it happened again in Wollongbar, because I worked in the bank, I was made treasurer of the golf club, and I was secretary of the tennis club,
Yes.
captain of the cricket club, and all these things, because you got a little bit of prestige,
Yes.
and the
A
beauty,
bit of skill that people knew. Yeah.
yes, and the beauty of it too, with the cricket and football, I used to go to the pub in the afternoon when I went, and all the boys would be there, the plumbers and all those
Yeah.
young workers. But on the weekend, I could be invited out to the big landowner's place.
Okay.
You were that in between person, but you fitted into
Yes.
both scenes. And
Yes.
we finished up the place I used to go to nearly every weekend. Then for the next 2 years, wasn't a big place. It was a small wheat and sheep farm, and I became very friendly with Alan Edney, funnily, and we used to go out there and I'd spend the whole weekend with their place on the farm, and they were just wonderful family to me. They looked after me because I was still only early 20s. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
And I suppose you related because you came from a farm also?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, you knew what they were talking about when they said they had to go and do some work on the farm,
Yes.
You'd go and help.
Yeah, that's right.
But Berrigan was a terrific place. I learned a lot there, through the work, but also through being treasurer of the golf club. You're mixing with, and in those days, golf clubs were a little bit prestigious.
Yes. Yes.
Some of the city clubs still, but country golf clubs now are everybody's there, everybody's in. A council worker would very seldom go into a golf club in the country in those days.
In those days, yes.
Which is a shame, but that's all we've overcome that. Which
no, that's right.
Life's better.
Yeah.
But the Edney family, they were just wonderful people. They had a big family. They were a big family. Alan's father and had several brothers, and they had 5 in their family too. No, 4.
Yeah.
And, very good footballer, Alan. And his brother.
Yeah, so you have mixed the clubs, and you got to see lots of people playing cricket and golf and all those sorts of things. Yeah. So you were 4 years out there?
4 years.
4 years at Berrigan.
Yeah.
And then you headed into Sydney.
And yes, then went to Padstow.
Padstow, yeah. Okay.
The bank branch there, the one I was talking about a while ago, was just a little shop front.
Yes.
And I was rather disappointed with the bank later on. The business was growing very quickly because it was a new suburb.
Sure.
And their business has grown so much that they bought a block of land in the main street of Padstow and built this brand new big building. Because they put an extra staff in, there was no room for staff at the other place. You only have a certain number of staff. This new place in, and they had to appoint, when you got to so many staff, you had to have a manager and an accountant.
Yes.
You didn't have to be a qualified accountant, but accountant for all banking purposes. And I wasn't old enough.
Okay.
I've been doing it on less staff in all cramped conditions for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I got a letter saying that I was being transferred to Narendra.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the other night, I got the letter and I wrote it up in a ball and threw it. And, because, you know, I'd done my time in the country,
Yes.
I thought.
Yes.
But it was a wonderful move because Narandra was a very good place.
Are there still all the manual procedures in place at that stage, or had automation started?
Automation had started.
Yes.
I think at Narandra. I think we had two young men, two blokes just a bit younger than myself, plus a girl. So they may have been still using. No, there would have been some sort of mechanisation.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That. Yeah. Sorry.
So you enjoyed the time at Narandra also?
Yes, well, I played cricket and I played golf. Didn't get onto any committees there, which was good, except for running a beauty queen competition. They were running a sports competition.
Yes.
Miss so and so, and the local shire engineer came to me and said, "Would I like to head up this little subcommittee?"
Yeah.
And it was Bill Satterthwaite, the
Yes.
father of Bishop Satterthwaite from Lismore.
Oh,
Later, I didn't know that then,
Ah.
but so we ran that competition. But the golf club there was my main haunt. I still didn't have a motor vehicle. I didn't have a motor vehicle at any time during this period.
Yeah.
But I had a bike, and I used to ride my bike out to the golf club. And, I could become friendly with the barman there, who was an Englishman, Tommy Lee, and Tom and I became friendly. And if he had any functions on, I would always go out and help him serve in the bar. And,
Okay.
and I won of the championships there was for an A grader and a B grader playing match play.
Yeah.
And I fortunately got an old Scotsman. As he was the A grade, I was on about 18 or so. And
So it would be a handicap match play,
a
wouldn't it?
handicap match play.
Yeah.
And he was a wily old chook, lovely fellow. But, we won this championship and it was good. Narandra was a good place. I made some good friends there too. And, amazingly, something with I've always been able to make friends, but I've always let them slip when usually when I've gone.
Yes.
You know, those fellas at Berrigan, you know, I just loved it there.
Yeah.
And I didn't
follow up.
follow them up, and the same at Narandra.
Yeah.
The ones at a couple of Padstow I followed up, but
It's probably distance, isn't it? Really.
it is, yes.
Yeah.
And life was wasn't hectic, but it was fairly full.
Yes.
You know, a young unmarried man with
Yeah.
a lot of young married men and girls
Yes.
around, so you're always busy.
Yes.
And you worked long hours.
Yeah.
The banking. Wallenbar was the only place where I didn't work long hours, but that's another story. I'll come to that later, I think.
Yeah.
But those friends that I made, I still remember their names and lots of things about them, but
Yeah.
I just haven't. Well, I've never been a letter writer.
Yes.
The same as I read one book a year, I think, if I'm lucky, and I can only get halfway through it to put it there. Sitting down and reading or writing is not my thing. I'd rather either go to the garden or watch TV these days.
Yeah.
Or play golf.
So from there you were back to the city again?
Yeah, I went to Bellingham
Bellingham,
for
okay.
12 months.
12 months. That's a nice town, isn't it?
Lovely spot, Bellingham. And once again, made some good friends there.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Bellington was good.
Yeah.
It's funny, along the track, Maisie came into things a lot in my life.
Okay.
When I first left Lismore, I went to casino for a few months. Maisie and Noel were living on the North Casino Railway area.
Yeah.
They were living in camp tents there.
Yes. Yes.
And I stayed with them.
Yep.
When I first went to Padstow, Maisie and Noel happened to be in Sydney.
Yeah.
And they knew somebody who got me a place to board at Beverly Hills.
Yes.
Lovely old lady whom I've stayed with for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
When I came to Bellingen, they were back at Coffs Harbour, and they were my home base. You know, I'd go
Yes.
across to Coffs Harbour to be with them every second weekend, which was good. Yeah. But Bellingen, I enjoyed it. I think all these places have got a lot if you want to look for it.
Yeah.
If you open your eyes and look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from then on, I went back to Sydney to head office. I was mainly put in as an extra person on the ground floor of Martin Place and George Street, which was the head office. We had a big normal banking system area on the ground floor and the second floor, but above that was the inspectors, the manager for New South Wales and sub-managers and inspectors and all that. They were up above. But my job basically was to relieve those who were the same level as I was, if they were going on holidays, and if it was above that, I would relieve the senior clerk on the ground floor, and he would take the assistant accountant or the head accountant, or he would move up one, and they'd all move one up the ladder. It was good, but you got to know a lot there too about business, and one of the jobs of an afternoon, every afternoon, was to check to see how much money had come through the bank on that particular day, and what liquid cash we had overnight.
Yes.
And we might have $2 million extra in the bank itself.
Yeah. Or pounds it would have been there.
Pounds, yes.
Yeah.
Which we would invest with discount. What are they called? Anyway, they were. You'd get 0.2% interest overnight. Or something.
Yes.
You know, so you'd invest, you'd ring them, and say that we've got 2 million, such and such and such, and they would take that, and then the following morning that money would come back to the bank.
Yeah.
But overnight, which they must have money dealings overseas.
Yes.
Well, I didn't understand that part of it.
The money didn't go out the door though. It was
Didn't
still
go out the door,
in the safe.
Still in the safe, yeah. And it was still mostly on paper.
And that's sort of amazing scene inside those safes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us what that looked like. Did you?
Well, Bluey Ridley was the safekeeper at Sydney, but Martin Place and George Street.
Yeah.
He was 2 floors down, and the safes with big combination safes and plus keys, so that no one person could ever get in there.
Yes.
And it was my first run up with security guards.
Yes.
And they had these very well armed security guards there all day, all night, with all this money. And another big branch like Martin, Pitt and Hunter Street or somebody like that would have a big payout for wages or something. So they'd be bagging up tens of thousands of pounds in exactly notes that they wanted.
Yes.
They didn't. The money wasn't differentiated there. It was just all in one bulk.
Yeah.
If you needed £20,000 of £5 notes, well, that's what you
That's what
threw
you
the
got.
button.
Yeah.
And that would go out to the other branches with
Yeah.
armoured guards all the way.
So how long were you at Martin Place?
Probably about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And that was from there. I did do relief work at other branches, some in Sydney, Castlereagh Street, Newtown, Hamilton at Newcastle. And then I went out to probably Granville Parks, Forbes, where I would go out to relieve the small branch. I'd be relieving the manager,
Yeah.
bigger branch. And from there I was sent to relieve at Kempsey,
Yeah.
which was a very good stroke of luck.
Yes.
I was sent there on 2 occasions, and
So that when are we talking about now? What are we talking about?
1960.
1960. So you've been 12 years since you started work in the bank? Yeah. 1948 to 1960? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
And you're about, what are you now? You're nearly 30 years old? 30 years old.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
that's right. So 28 to 28.
30 odd, 30 odd,
Yeah.
31, 61 I'd be 30, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We might have a break. Okay. Second trip to Kempsey.
Right. Okay. After I left Kempsey, I did a few more relief jobs. At Narrabri and a few other places around. And then, for that, I don't know why, but I got another trip to Kempsey. And Jeffrey, I didn't organise it, it just happened. I think the manager got sick and Hal had to go up and relieve him, and I was relieving Hal. And I got to know the Richards family a lot better, and they welcomed me into their home. Lynn's dad was 13 years older than his mother,
Yes.
so I'm quite used to having an age difference, but moved along fairly nicely, and I fitted in. Lynn introduced me to a lot of her friends, and we got on well. And then I announced my engagement, I think. I'm just not quite sure of the timeline.
So how long were you at Kempsey? You got there in your first trip was in 61, or
61, yes.
and then you were back not long after to Kempsey again.
After end of 61, early
Yeah.
62, I think.
Okay.
And then the next time was after the Miss New South Wales competition,
Yes.
and
That was for a further extended period of time, or was
that,
it
it was several weeks.
several weeks? Okay.
Several weeks, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, and I got on well with everybody there, and we felt as though we were matched to
Yeah.
each other, and that we could get along. So we announced our engagement, and then I was transferred to Wollumbar on a permanent basis as accountant.
Yeah.
And the bank preferred their accountants and managers to be married rather than single
Okay.
single men, and I think it was only men too. I don't think there were any women managers in those days, and that's not that many years ago, is it?
No, that's right.
Well, it's 55 years ago, so it's a fair while.
Yeah.
So Lynn, there were a lot of trips then to Kempsey, and trips Lynn was able to borrow one of her parents' vehicles, and
Yeah.
she'd come up or get a lift up with somebody and spend a few days up there. I was boarding with Mrs. Macmillan, whose husband, who 10 years before her husband had been the Sergeant of Police at Berrigan.
Oh, okay.
And she was a Golan from Corrigai.
Oh,
And yeah, so life goes round and round in
yeah,
circles.
it's amazing.
Sometimes
who
the
you
circle-
meet.
Sometimes the circles are very small.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yes, and at this stage, or prior to that, on one of my trips down there, I had a car accident in my little 750 this Austin.
Yeah.
Austin? Morris.
Morris. Yes.
We got it back to Kempsey, and the Morris dealer there gave me a few dollars for it, and I ordered a brand new Morris Elite, which was the modern little
Yes.
little four-door car at that stage, a lovely vehicle. I'd only had it for a couple of weeks, and Lynn was to go to Inverell for a Glen Innes for a conference with the library.
Yes.
So rather than try and take their vehicles, she took my vehicle. She came up and got it and went up to Inverell. Crossing the highway at Glen Innes on the way back, a vehicle suddenly appeared on the right-hand door handle.
Yeah.
And rolled my brand new car over the paddock a bit.
Yeah.
Lynn was luckily not hurt. The car was damaged badly, and it went into garage up there. So that wasn't long before our wedding, because we had to borrow Lynn's brother-in-law's car to go on our honeymoon.
Oh, okay.
And on the way back from our honeymoon, we went down through Glen Innes to check how the car was.
Yeah.
They hadn't touched it. And the insurance company was the ANZ Bank's own insurance company. So there was a lot of swearing and carrying on, gnashing of teeth, and they just hadn't done anything,
Yeah.
and which was very bad.
Some things never change, is it?
Some things never change, yes. And like the banks and all around, they don't always look after their customers the best they can. But anyway, we eventually got it back, and the next 11 or 10 years, 9 years in Moreland.
Okay. Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We went, on the first night was Nambucca Heads, and we're pulling into the pub at Nambucca Heads,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, somebody had taken the hubcaps off and put a couple of pennies in there, because you didn't hear them until you're standing down right in front of the bar. And all the boys cheered for this. They spent the first night there. The second night we went to Yamba.
Yeah.
But on the way to Yamba we stopped at the pub at McLean.
Yes.
And when we got there was Gordon and Shirley and Ronnie and Bonnie and Boy and Boyer. And
What were they all doing there?
they're all coming back from the wedding.
Oh, I see. That's as far as they got.
They got there. They're all at the pub at McLean. So we had another family gathering. Then we went from there to the Gold Coast. Had a couple of days at Currumbin. Then we went to Bagara, out from Bundaberg.
Okay.
Yeah, and we stayed in a motel there. And at that stage, cousin was still at Bagara, so we were able to visit her.
Yeah.
Jean, yes, Barrett.
Jean Barrett.
Jean Barrett.
Yes, I know the name. I don't know whether I remember.
We stayed there. On the way back to Brisbane, we called into the pub in the valley in Brisbane, where the publican was Bill Hogan, whom I stayed with in my travelling days down at Cessna.
Oh,
Bill
okay.
had the pub there, and he and his wife.
The people you run into, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, he and his wife had this hotel with their four children, and so we called in, and we spent, I think, 2 or 3 nights with them in the pub in Brisbane. And when they come to pay the bill that night, that morning rather, Bill said, "Oh, it's on the house, just a night with your wife." And I said, "Well, how much?" But we didn't have to pay anything, but yeah, that was lovely with them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they lost their daughter not long after that.
Yeah.
A bright young girl walking across a pedestrian crossing, the car went straight through them.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It broke Bill's heart, and
Yeah.
he went downhill very soon after that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So then back to Wollongbar, and we only just got there and got the clothes changed, and well, it was 13 months, but Megan was born.
Okay. Yes.
So at this stage, life was good.
Yep.
Very, very, we thought we were very, very coy and careful, but she was born, and 15 months later, Alison came along,
Yeah.
and then Rachel. That was all very quick,
Yes.
which was good,
Yes.
because those Megan and Alison went right through school together then.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
yes. And the Lynn's, that was 1970, which wasn't a good year, as you might recall.
No, that's right.
My mum and dad, and your dad, and
Yeah.
Lynn's dad,
And Dad's mother. So
that's your mother, yeah, your grandmother.
grandmother.
Yeah.
It was an amazing thing, really. It was all within a period of about 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
6
and
months.
there was also a relation of ours, I can't remember his name, Jack somebody, who
Yeah.
was very close to Mum,
Yes.
and he died in that same
Yes.
little period.
Yeah.
And so Lynn was expecting Rachel at that stage,
Yes.
and she was down at Kempsey. Her father was very ill, and she went to Sydney, and he died.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she got back to Kempsey, and the doctor said, "You're not going home."
Okay.
And so Rachel was born in Kempsey Hospital,
Okay.
and we didn't see her for a few
Yes.
weeks.
Yeah.
Cameron was also born in Brisbane, in Wollongbar,
Yeah.
and the week after he was born, I went to see Dr. Jim. He stopped this,
Ah,
stopped this rot.
stop the rock as he did. So where did you live in Moranbah? Do you live in town?
In town, yes.
Yeah.
We were in a little, or an old house to start with. It was converted to a flat, just down from the Catholic Church, near the showground, and it was, I can still remember Dr. Betty Marks. I'm sitting on the front veranda, Lynn was in hospital, and Dr. Betty Marks walking across the lawn to come let me know that I'd had a first daughter,
Ah, right.
which was, I can remember that.
Yeah.
And Megan became the star of the dog club too. As she was growing up, Lynn would come out to pick me up after
Yeah.
golf, and it was me to run in, and Laurie Jenkins, the barkeeper, was very close friends with.
Yeah.
He'd grab her and put her up in the bar and dead on the bar. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was very cute. And,
Yeah.
but that was a great period of our lives.